Okay. Hello, hello, hello.
Pardon?
Are you beginning?
Yes. All right. Let's get underway here and have a poetry reading. Good afternoon.
Good morning.
I'm Jeff Johnson. I'm serving on the English faculty here, and I'm also the director of Verse Like Water. And I've got a very brief introduction here and a couple of small business notes first. Do the right thing with your phones if you can, especially you dear teenagers. I know that you need them, but we don't need them necessarily at a poetry reading. Everything begins with thanks and praise, as I always say. I want to thank the CLC Foundation. I want to thank the Minnesota State Arts Board as one of our sponsors, as well as the Olseth Family Foundation, and Minnesota Public Radio is helping out as they always do. Another business note, we're going to have a reading that's going to run about 45 minutes here, and then there'll be a book signing in the lobby outside the Chalberg Theater, and then we'll be back in here at 1:30 for a craft talk. And thank you all especially for coming. Verse Like Water, the visiting poet program at Central Lakes College today, marks 12 years of celebrating the necessity of poetry. And it is a vivid, astonishing pleasure to be introducing at once Ilya Kaminksy, Valzhyna Mort, and Nikola Madzirov. Like all the reading series of the world, our theme is entirely about the pursuit of beauty, which, as Plato once wrote, helps the soul take wings. And there is an additional focus on the human experience of exile. Half of the 40 poets we have brought to the Brainerd Lakes region were born outside the United States. It's an old story. We can understand our own human hearts if we encounter the hearts of others, hearts that may beat in a different way. And that is today's dream that I know will come true. I wrote the grant that would fund this literary event over a year ago when Vladimir Putin's horrific war on Ilya's country, Ukraine, was bursting ever more seriously into bloom. How do we begin to understand this? You could put in a thimble what I know about the troubled history of many countries in Eastern Europe, but I know I could get insight from Nikola, who was born in 1973 to a family of refugees going nowhere after the Balkan Wars. and Valzhyna, who for some time now has helped me realize that if you want to understand the atrocities, genocide, displacement, and executions of tens of millions of innocent people, Belarus alone can be the prism that sufficiently explains the banality of evil. I will admit that since the early weeks of 2020 led us all to inhabit a history that feels very different, I'm overwhelmed. And more than ever, I look to poets and poetry as a hedge against the darkness. Verse-like-water poet Charles Simic was right when he proclaimed that in the worst of centuries, in the crummiest cities in the world, we find that poetry still gets written. I think, too, of my hero, Adam Zagajewski, who we had to cancel when the darkness descended. He once said to me, "I won't help you. For a lyric poet, there's no story, no moral, no lesson." Zagajewski believed poets and poetry can only provide moments of lucidity, and I propose we all look for this right now as we offer a warm Minnesota welcome to Valzhyna, Mort, Ilya, Kaminksy, and Nikola Madzirov. So I get weepy.
Hello, beautiful people. How's life? I can help you, Jeff. Jeff needs us. Why don't we start chatting? We are here to read poems and to just have a good time with you guys. We can start with poems, or we can start with ping pong.
Which is the same thing, because poetry is a conversation.
Okay, perfect.
The little ball.
Okay.
Hey, I guess I could go.
Yes.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having us here. Ilya and Nikola are like two brothers to me. They are two very tall men, and when I'm with them, I always feel that my heart is very tall. They never make me feel smaller than I am. And thank you so much to Jeff for bringing us together. Nikola, Ilya, and I know each other for a very long time, and we live all over the world, torn away from each other by various circumstances like life and work. But two poets that are very important, I know, to verse like water, connect us as our mama and uncle. Our mama is Caroline Forchet, who read here some time ago, and all three of us at different points lived in Caroline's house. She sheltered us during dark times. And our uncle, our strange, wonderful, gentle uncle, is Adam Zagajewski. I'm going to take you to Minsk, and we'll travel in space and in time. There are students here, so I'll want us all to be students with me in Minsk in the 90s as the Soviet Empire is collapsing. And there is a lot of silence, the silenced history of violence that permeates the landscape of the city. And invisibly marks one's relationship with it. So I'm going to read to you a piece that is a part of a prose poem, but I hope you will feel that it is a poem, because for me, the body of a poem is rhythm. And with this rhythm, I hope to carry you away and to show you Minsk in the 90s from the window of a high school. Minsk has 4 distinct seasons. Each is its own country. Winter is like being inside the static of an untuned TV. Inside the winter's static, school's marble hallways stretch like a long electric buzz. Winter's ice debris is magnetized by the Palace of the Republic, a gray planet that commands the rings of snowstorms. There are people bent over in the ice debris. There's blood on the snow. There are police truncheons raised like black wheat. A city square of truncheons rising and falling like black wheat in the snowstorm. When I look out of the school window, it's always a winter night, and there is always blood in the snow. In the winter dark, the art teacher is projecting Rembrandts onto a blackboard. She wants us to understand something about Rembrandt's darkness, but I look outside and it's dark, and there is blood on the snow. She shows us Leonardo's Madonna Lita, points to the ripped stitches on the Madonna's dress. The mother decided to stop breastfeeding and had stitched up the nursing slits in her dress, the teacher explains. But the divine child must have cried, asking for breast milk, and she ripped the threads. The art teacher wants us to be moved, but my grandmother made her living sewing dresses simple as 2 + 2, and most of my clothes are handmade. The magnetic pull of the Palace of the Republic is growing stronger and makes my head ache. The Madonna's face is white without a single stroke visible on it. It seems to be washed in chlorine, and mixing with a bitter feeling about my grandmother's sewing, my stomach turns. Outside it's winter static. There are people bent there and there is blood in the snow. School's lit up corridors are washed with chlorine. What else is without a stroke? The smooth marble of monuments, the smooth marble of school corridors, the smooth marble of gravestones. Corridor, curere, a place for running. Running in the hallways is forbidden. On each shoulder I have epaulets of snow. There was often blood in the snow by the dental clinic next to our block, but there is more blood in the snow by the Palace of the Republic. Blood debris circles around the Palace of the Republic, magnetized. I close my eyes and open them again. When my eyes open, they make a sound like a creaking swing. It's the swing that winds up all the watches in the microregions. It's the watches that mothers look into like into mirrors. They adjust their hair. Each hair on their heads is a clock hand held up by hairspray. Mothers live inside concrete carpets of light. I walk brushing them gently away from my face, only suddenly it's pages of a book that I'm brushing. I run through corridors. Correre, correre, I croak over the black wheat. I swim up the still water of staircases, holding my breath. Inside history books, mothers are feeding the dead with our unsatisfying homework. I too am a mother, and I swipe blood from the snow with a public bus ticket. After being carried in a purse next to a warm loaf of bread, the ticket is soft. Here's my grandmother stitching punched bus tickets back up. Here are the columns of the Palace of the Republic punching holes in the people's heads. Ice debris circles the Palace of the Republic. There is a secret corridor that leads from an ice crystal on the square to the crystal ball in our cupboard. But the entrance into the ice crystal is blocked with a drop of blood. Some winters are like being inside the static of a TV channel that has stopped showing the news. I look out of the window to see what's going on at the Palace of the Republic, but I have to look through the darkness of Rembrandt first. I see a large square planted with a black wheat of police truncheons thrashing in the snowstorm. I'm safe behind the marble tape of school corridors, and corridor means either run, or there's nowhere to run, or time is running out. I fail my history class, which is a class on the origins of the word corridor. Is it a corridor or a corridor of shame? Is it perhaps not a corridor, but a long apartment block? Is it the Stalin line, the Pale of Settlement, the exclusion zone? Operation Winter Magic was aimed at creating a depopulation zone on the Belarusian-Latvian border. Several hundred villages were burned, with all the civil population gathered inside barns. This is why we do not build barns anymore. We build the Palace of the Republic. The Palace of the Republic won't let us be burned inside it. But first, there's blood in the snow. But first, we have to do something with all this blackened wheat caught in the ice storm. This is the winter magic, but it's not winter magic. I live in an overpopulated micro-region in a previously depopulated country, and my city is a hero city, and there is blood in the snow. I'm safe behind the marble tape of school corridors. A type of torture practiced by the employees of the Palace of the Republic is called a corridor. The employees of the Palace of the Republic line up in 2 rows facing each other, thus forming a corridor. Correre, correre. They force the detainees to run through this corridor while they beat the detainees with truncheons. Correre, correre. This is not the old winter magic, but it's always winter. The art teacher is speechless in front of Rembrandt. Correre, correre. I close my eyes with a creak. I try to shut my eyelids like a creaking garlic mincer. Let my mother hear the creaking. Let her start wiping her hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Valzhyna, for this very beautiful and moving reading. Thank you. It's really such a... Are you able to hear me okay? Good. It's really such a pleasure and an honor to read with these 2 poets who have been wonderful friends and also wonderful inspirations for the last 100 years. So I'm really glad and honored to be here. And I'm so grateful to you all for being here as well, and to Jeff for bringing us together. Thank you. Thank you. I'll just read a couple of poems. The first one is called We Lived Happily During the War. As you might have noticed, I speak with a pretty heavy accent. So you have this lovely piece of cardboard with poems in a very large font. So it will be very easy for you to follow. But hopefully it might help to navigate the accent a little bit. The poem I'm reading is very much in a corner, on the left corner of the first page, which is called Deaf Republic. The poem is called We Lived Happily During the War. We lived happily during the war. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed, around my bed. America was fallen. Invisible house, by invisible house, by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous reign, in a house of money, in a street of money, in a city of money, in a country of money. Our great country of money. We forgive us, lived happily during the war. Death Republic, the book I'm reading from is a story in verse about a pregnant woman and her husband in a time of crisis. And I won't be able to read you a whole lot from it, but you might get a sense of it if you just look at some of the pieces in your handout. For now, I'll just read a little love poem from it in the bottom right corner called Before the War, We Made a Child. The book is quite a bit about crisis and violence, but in the middle of it, people still fall in love and try to make a life. Before the war, we made a child. I kissed a woman whose freckles sorrows the neighbors. She had a mole on her shoulder, which she displayed like a medal for bravery. Her trembling lips might come to bed. Her hair would have fallen in the middle of the conversation might come to bed. I walked in my barber shop of thoughts, yes, I zipped her off to bed on a chair of my hairy arms. But parted lips, when bite my parted lips, lying under the cool sheets. Sonia, the things we did. Let's turn this little handout on the other side. And the first poem you will see in front of you in the top left corner is called Soldier Seimatas. Soldier Seimatas. They fire, and the crowd of women flees inside the nostrils of searchlights. My God, have a photograph of this. In the piazza's bright air, soldiers drag Peter's body and his head upon the stairs. I feel through my wife's shorts the shape of our child. Soldiers drag Peter up the stairs, and homeless dogs in as philosophers understand everything. And bark, I, now on a bridge with no camouflage of speech, a body, wrapping the body of my pregnant wife. Tonight, we don't die, and don't die. The earth is still, a helicopter I balls my wife on earth. A man cannot flip a finger at the sky, because each man is already a finger flipped at the sky. All right, in the center of this page, we have a little poem called A Cigarette. A cigarette. Watch. Washington citizens do not know they are evidence of happiness. In a time of war, each is a ripped out document of laughter. Watch, God, they have something to tell that not even they can hear. Grab a roof in the center square of this bombed out city, you will see one neighbor gives a cigarette, another gives a dog a pint of sunlit beer. You will find me, God, like a damn pigeon speak. I am pecking every which way at astonishment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Valzhyna and Ilya. As Valzhyna said, we have common mother and uncles, and they were giving us shelter. But let me say that I don't need. When I say shelter, it's not about space. It's not about measuring. It's about now at this moment being with Valzhyna and Ilya. I feel truly sheltered. And I wouldn't be a refugee at the moment. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing us together. It's a great honor to read with my brother and sister. In a house with open windows. The first poem I'm going to read is a poem that includes all the verses I have ever read and I have ever read and I will never write. It's home. I lived at the edge of the town, like a street lamp whose light bulb no one ever replaces. Cobwebs held the walls together and sweat our clasped hands. I hid my teddy bear in holes in crudely built stone walls, saving him from dreams. Day and night, I made the threshold come alive, returning like a bee that always returns to the previous flower. It was a time of peace when I left home. The bitten apple was not bruised. On the letter, a stamp with an old abandoned house. From birth, I have migrated to quiet places, and voids have clung beneath me like snow that doesn't know if it belongs to the earth or to the air, like snow that doesn't know if it belongs to the earth or to the air. The second poem has maybe the most optimistic title I've ever wrote. It's I Don't Know. The title is I Don't Know. So it was interesting once in Slovenia, like the actor comes in panic, asking me, please tell me which poem you're going to read. I have to read the Slovenian translations. And I said to him, I don't know. And so you can imagine his face, so I wouldn't share the end of the story. Distant are all the houses I'm dreaming of. Distant is the voice of my mother calling me for dinner, but I run toward the fields of wheat. We are distant like a ball that misses the goal and goes toward the sky. We're alive like a thermometer that is precise only when we look at it. The distant reality every day questions me like an unknown traveler who wakes me up in the middle of journey saying, is this the right bus? And I answer, yes. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know the cities of your grandparents who want to leave behind all discovered diseases and cures made of patience. I dream of a house on the hill of our longings, to watch how the waves of the sea draw the cardiogram of our falls and loves. How people believe so as not to sink, and step so as not to be forgotten. Distant are all the huts where we hid from the storm and from the pain of the deers dying in front of the eyes of the hunters who were more lonely than hungry. The distant moment every day asks me, is this the window? Is this the life? And I say yes. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if birds will begin to speak. without whispering, a war. Shadows pass us by. We'll meet one day like a paper boat and a watermelon that's been cooling in the river. The anxiety of the world will be with us. Our palms will eclipse the sun, and we'll approach each other holding lanterns. One day the wind won't change direction, the birch will send away leaves. In our shoes on the doorstep, the wolves will come after our innocence. The butterflies will leave their dust on our cheeks. An old woman will tell stories about us in the waiting room every morning. Even what I'm saying has been said already. We are waiting for the wind like two flags on a border. One day, every shadow will pass us by. Separated. I separated myself from each truth about the beginnings of rivers, trees, and cities. I have a name that will be a street of goodbyes and a heart that appears on X-ray films. I separated myself even from you, mother of all skies and carefree houses. Now my blood is a refugee that belongs to several souls and open wounds. My God lives in the phosphorus of a match, in the ashes holding the shape of the firewood. I don't need a map of the world when I fall asleep. I don't need a map of the world when I fall asleep. Now, the shadow of a stalk of wheat covers my hope, and my word is as valuable as an old family watch that doesn't keep time. I separated from myself to arrive at your skin smelling of honey and wind, at your name signifying restlessness that calms me down, opening the doors to the cities in which I sleep, but don't live. I separated myself from the air, the water, the fire. The earth I was made from is built into my home. Fast is the century. It's written in Berlin while there was a series of earthquakes in Macedonia, and it's the way you feel guilt of not sharing the pain. Fast is the century. If I were wind, I would have peeled the bark of the trees and the facades of the buildings in the outskirts. If I were gold, I would have been hidden in cellars, into crumbly earth and among broken toys. I would have been forgotten by the fathers, and their sons would remember me forever. If I were a dog, I wouldn't have been afraid of refugees. If I were a moon, I wouldn't have been scared of executions. If I were a wall clock, I would have covered the cracks on the wall. Fast is the century. We survived the weak earthquakes, watching towards the sky, yet not towards the ground. We open the windows to let in the air of the places we have never been, and wars don't exist, since someone wounds our heart every day. Fast is the century, faster than the word. If I were dead, everyone would have believed me when I kept silent. Silence comes from somewhere else. When at evening I hear the voice of my dead mother, I summon dears to my side, they who understand all the languages of fear without saying a word. I would invite them into the courtyard of quiet changes and ask them about the sins of the unborn, about the distance between the blood of two enemies after the war. I would ask them to lock the silence, this secret of the open eyes. If you allow me the last poem, it's a very short poem, I will read for you in my mother tongue. It's written in Macedonian mother tongue and then the English translation. It's just to hear the music. We're talking about music today. So yeah, I said that I'm considered a bad guitar player in my family, and so that's why I try to catch the music through the words. Vidov sonovi. Vidov sonovi na nikoj ne se sekjava i plačenje na pogrešni grobovi, vidov prigradki vo vjan što paja i ulici su otvorene arteriji, vidov vulkani što spijat podolgo od korenot na semenuto steblo i jedno dete koje ne se plaši od doždot, samo mene nikoj ne me vide, samo mene nikoj ne me vide. I saw dreams. I saw dreams that no one remembers and people wailing at the wrong graves. I saw embraces in a falling airplane and streets with open arteries. I saw volcanoes asleep longer than the roots of the family tree and a child who is not afraid of the rain. Only it was me no one saw. Only it was me no one saw. Thank you, Blagodaram.
What a complaint.
Because we're streaming this, and we'll need to hear your question through the microphone, and I will grab this wireless mic and dart about with cunning and vigor and get it to you.
Hello. I would like to ask a question from our first speaker, if that would be all right. So you mentioned how you believe that the most important part of a poem is rhythm, correct?
No, I didn't say that. I said that the body of the poem.
Oh, the body.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry. Misheard that. I apologize. But my main question would be, so rhythm being the body of the poem. I am a musician myself, so when I think of rhythm, my brain goes straight to things like time signatures, like something be in 4/4 time or 6/8 time. So when you're writing poetry, do you think of the rhythm first and then the subject matter after, or do you write it, or do you choose the rhythm after you choose what the subject matter is?
Thank you. Oh, okay, we have our own microphone. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I really love music, and I learn a lot from music as a poet. I think that poetry has much more in common with music and architecture than with prose, for instance. And when I say that rhythm is a body of a poem, I'm really thinking about the poetic form. In a poem, a subject and form are not separate from each other, but connected, because the subject is always the same, right? Loss, mortality, joy, love. There is a kind of limited number of subject, or a beaten apple. The subject is not so important, but a poem creates a space, just as a musical piece creates a space out of sound and out of rhythm. And so it's not about what comes first. It's a little bit like the chicken and the egg. It's more that they are inseparable, and the subject is only possible because it's possible in this particular form, and it's looking for its form, and the form is there because the subject is there. And it's very abstract when one talks about it like that. But when you listen to a musical piece, when you listen to, I don't know, a symphony or a suite, there is or a fugue, for example, is a very good example here, because we just heard Nikola, who works so much with repetition. And in a fugue, you have a theme, right? A theme is introduced, and then little variations on it come in, and the theme comes back all the time, maybe in a different register, maybe in another instrument, but it returns and returns, and its return surprising to us, even though there is a kind of a formula that the musical piece is written, is following. So in a way, it shouldn't be surprising, yet it's surprising. And even if we know the musical piece by heart, those changes surprise us. When a piece begins loudly and energetically, we know that soon it's gonna go very quiet and slow. And after being slow and quiet, there's gonna be a ba-bang, right? It's coming. And as we listen, we're trying to anticipate it. And even when we know when it's coming, it still surprises us. We feel it in our stomach. And a poetic form is just like that. So this is what I mean by saying that the rhythm is the body of the poem, because one cannot paraphrase a poem. Well, you can paraphrase a story. Yeah, you read the summary of the novel that you were supposed to read, and then you kind of maybe doing okay in class. But a poem is not about information. It's not about what it is about. It's about giving you an experience of moving through space, which is why it's so hard to talk about it in class, just like it's hard to talk about music. Yeah, you could always begin by saying, this is now student advice, you could always begin by saying, let me read it to you. And then talk about how it made you feel. Thank you.
So at the beginning of the reading, the idea was thrown out about poetry being, or should be, a conversation. And that's an idea that I really like, and I think it's important, especially for like students or like young and aspiring writers. And this was touched on a little bit in the last question, but like, what do you feel is the most fulfilling or like influential part of that conversation? Like, has there ever been a time like a reader or like a fellow poet has given you feedback or commentary on a poem, and like how has that influenced you or changed your writing process, if it has? And that's open to anyone who'd like to answer.
It's for everybody, yeah.
All at the same time, right?
Okay.
Or would you like a conversation? I think the poet Paul Celan once said that a poem is like a message in a bottle that you send and somebody finds it. He kind of took that idea from the poet Osip Mandelstam, who said that a poem is like a handshake across time and space. Poem, to my mind, is a conversation with the dead, perhaps. Somebody wrote something that moved you, and so you're responding 1,000 years later, say, hey, you Horace, out there in the Roman Empire, writing in a dead language called Latin. This is how we live. And you don't necessarily put Horace on a pedestal and bound say, oh, you Horace, a great writer, great writer, great writer. No, great writers are like cats and dogs in your house. They want to play with you. They want you to give them some bread and milk. Valzhyna said that poem is not an information. And so to follow this cat metaphor, since we are in conversation, I don't remember who, but somebody said poem is about something, like cat is about a house. But we are also in kind of conversations, again, to just follow up on what was said before. We are in kind of conversations that are not necessarily direct conversation. You say that, I say that, and by the way, you're wrong, oh, I'm right. No, not necessarily. A lot of this is unsaid. The reader becomes a part of conversation. The silences inside the poem cast a spell on the reader, so the reader has to come back to this poem sometime 10 years later and realize, oh, that is what it is. The word spell, we kind of misunderstand it in American culture. We mean, I cast a spell on you, because we have this kind of culture that likes control, right? But spell is an ancient thing. When we didn't have medicine, when we didn't have drugstores, we believed in power of words to heal. And words still heal, if you agree with Freud anyway. But a poem is a kind of words that you cast a spell on yourself. You have to come back to that poem. You find yourself in conversation with it. But I'm conversing too much. Your turn.
Okay, we go with the conversation on poetry, which is, I hope it's not conversation of poetry, it's not a vivisection like that students of medicine do with a dead body, because poetry is a body, the poem is a body, as Valzhyna said, I agree. The body needs a shadow. Maybe that's why those white, the architecture of poem needs this whiteness around, needs space to breathe, it needs its shadow to change the shape. And in a way, it is a dialogue with yourself. We often quote Yeats about it, but also we all dream of a reader as Glenn Gould was the reader of Bach. We want someone to, in a way, to increase our insecurity in what we write, to confirm the fear of imperfection of language, kind of. And we quoted, we mentioned today also in our conversation on the way to hear Ivo Andrić, who was prose writer, Nobel winner and an essayist, but he paid great respect, as well as Hannah Arendt and Cioran, to poetry, saying that a poem always have to surprise with already known things. With already known things. So the subjects are here, we know them. But the architecture, the mirrors, the windows. Heidegger used to say that the poets are the guards of the language, of the house of the language. But this house has to have an open window. This can be the translator, this can be the reader. This open window is in a way that this conversation that never ends, I think.
I think it's time for us to have a book signing. And remember, there'll be a craft talk after that at 1:30. Thank you so much for coming. Keep your eye on Verse Like Water. We're introducing the United Kingdom's Poet Laureate Simon Armitage here, November 15th. Thank you for coming.